My dad's new wife demanded I pay them rent to live in my own house. My life has always felt like it started with a debt I could never repay. You see, my mom passed away in hospital while giving birth to me. I never got to meet her, never got to feel her hold me, but her absence was the single most present thing in my childhood. My dad raised me, if you can call it that. To him, I wasn't a son. I was a living, breathing reminder of his greatest loss. He somehow looked at me, a literal baby, and decided I was to blame for his wife's death. Growing up, there wasn't a single day that went by without him reminding me of my original sin. It was never a direct, "This is your fault," but it was worse, woven into the fabric of our lives in 1,000 cutting ways. "Your mother would have loved this," he'd say with a sigh, looking at a sunset, the unspoken part hanging in the air. "If you hadn't taken her from me." He'd tell me constantly how my birth had ripped away the person he loved the most, and sometimes, in his darker moments, he'd admit that he never really wanted me in the first place. He'd point a finger at me and say things like, "Your life came at the highest possible cost, so you better work damn hard to make it mean something. Don't let her sacrifice be for nothing." As a kid, hearing those words was like a constant, low-grade poison. I was too young to grasp the complexities of an adult's grief, his anger, his loss. All I knew was that I needed my mom, too, and she was gone. The only parent I had left treated me like I was the source of all his problems. My dad was supposed to be my protector, my guide, the person who made me feel safe. Instead, he was the one who made me feel like an intruder in my own home, a curse on his life. That kind of environment messes with your head. I spent most of my childhood feeling an overwhelming sense of guilt just for existing, for taking up space, for breathing the air in our house. I remember times when I would ache to talk to him, to tell him how much his words sliced me up inside, how they made me feel like I didn't belong anywhere. But the few times I tried, mustering all the courage my little body could hold, I was met with a fresh wave of bitterness and anger that sent me scurrying back into silence. Fear became my closest companion. The result was a childhood that felt profoundly lonely. I'd watch other kids with their parents, see them getting cheered on at soccer games, getting hugged when they fell and scraped a knee, and it felt like watching a movie about a foreign planet. I was constantly walking on eggshells, meticulously trying to avoid saying or doing anything that might trigger his resentment. It wasn't just the absence of love that hurt. It was the constant, suffocating presence of his anger, all of it directed at the one thing I could never change, the fact that I was alive. Even with all that, a part of me, the stupid, hopeful kid part, desperately craved his approval. I held on to this fantasy that one day I could do something so great that he would finally look at me and see a son, not a tragedy. The day I got my report card was always a day of nervous, fluttering hope. I remember walking home, clutching a piece of paper with straight A's, my heart pounding. I'd rehearse it in my head. I'd walk in, hand it to him, and this time would be different. He'd smile, maybe even say he was proud of me. But it was always the same crushing disappointment. He'd take the report card, barely glance at the grades, and let out a non-committal grunt. "Keep studying harder," he'd say, not even looking at me. "This isn't good enough. There are hundreds of other kids who get grades like this. It's not special." Any flicker of pride I had would be instantly extinguished, replaced by that familiar, cold feeling of not being enough. It was a clear message. No matter what I did, I would never measure up. It wasn't just about school. Anytime I showed interest in something that wasn't purely academic, like joining the school basketball team or just wanted to hang out with friends, he'd shut it down immediately. "You have one job," he'd lecture, "and that's to study so you can get the hell out of my house as soon as you turn 18. Those words stung more than he knew. A constant reminder that I was a burden, a temporary problem he was waiting to get rid of. My friends would talk about their parents encouraging them, driving them to practice, telling them to have fun. For me, there was only the cold expectation to be invisible until I could be gone. Weekends were the worst. While other kids were at the movies or sleeping over at a friend's house, I was usually stuck at home. If I dared to ask to go out, even for something simple and free like going to the park, he would launch into a tirade about how I was wasting his money. "Do you have any idea how hard I worked to put a roof over your head?" He'd yell. "And you want to go waste time with your friends? You have no right." In his eyes, anything that brought me a little bit of joy was a frivolous waste of resources. One of the memories that still burns the brightest is my 15th birthday. For most kids, it's a milestone, a day of excitement. For me, it was always a day filled with dread. He hated celebrating my birthday because it was also the anniversary of my mom's death. But that year, I stupidly thought things might have changed. I just wanted to do something normal, to go see a movie with a few friends and grab some pizza afterward. I spent a week working up the courage to ask him for $20. When I finally did, he exploded. He screamed at me, his face red with fury, telling me I had no right to celebrate the day that took my mom away. He made it crystal clear that for him, my birthday would always be the worst day of his year, and I should be ashamed for even thinking about enjoying it. I never asked again. I spent that birthday, and every one after, locked in my room, waiting for the day to be over. Over time, all these experiences hammered one lesson into my head. My dad hated me, and he didn't want me around. The constant rejection chipped away at my self-worth until I felt like a ghost in my own life. I learned to keep my hopes and dreams to myself, because sharing them only led to more disappointment. I stopped looking for his approval and poured all my energy into one single goal: getting good enough grades to escape. The day I got my acceptance letter to a top university, along with a full scholarship, was the first day I remember feeling like I could finally breathe. It was a cocktail of pure, intoxicating relief and a quiet, hard-won pride. I was getting out. I was finally leaving his house, his oppressive shadow, and starting a new life on my own terms. The moment I packed my last bag and closed the door of that house behind me, it felt like a 10-ton weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time, I felt free. Those 4 years in college were like stepping out of a black and white movie into glorious Technicolor. It was a period of explosive growth, self-discovery, and genuine, uncomplicated joy. I was finally living the life of a normal young adult, experiencing all the things that had been denied to me. My dad tried to keep his grip on me, calling to criticize my choices or demand to know what I was doing, but his voice had lost its power over me. I'd listen, give one-word answers, and then hang up. I'd spent 18 years under his thumb. Now it was my time. But I didn't let the newfound freedom derail me. I never forgot the desperation that fueled my escape. I kept my grades up, determined to make the most of the opportunity one had earned. But I also let myself live. I went to parties, joined clubs, made friends who felt more like family than my actual family ever had, and just existed. It was during this time that I met Sheila. Meeting her wasn't like a lightning strike. It was more like finding a quiet, warm room in the middle of storm. From the beginning, there was something about her that just clicked with me. We were both ambitious, driven, and focused on building our careers, but it was the connection underneath that really mattered. Sheila understood me in a way I didn't even understand myself yet. One of the things I love most about our relationship is our ability to just be together in comfortable silence. With her, I never feel the pressure to perform or to fill the space with chatter. She lets me get lost in my own thoughts, and she's perfectly content to be lost in hers right beside me. She was the first person who made me feel like I didn't have to constantly apologize for who I was. She saw the pain I carried around, the guilt that had become such a permanent part of me that I barely noticed it anymore. One night, after I told her a few stories about my dad, she looked at me with such clarity and said, "You know that's not normal, right? It was deeply, fundamentally wrong for him to blame you for your mother's death. No child should ever have to carry that." Hearing someone else say it, someone I respected and loved, was like a key turning in a lock I didn't know was there. She was the one who encouraged me to seek therapy. The idea had never crossed my mind. My dad's version of reality was so deeply ingrained in me that I didn't realize there was another way to see it. Going to therapy was one of the hardest and best things I've ever done. At first, it was brutal, confronting the trauma of my upbringing, acknowledging the abuse, and slowly dismantling the toxic beliefs I had internalized felt like emotional surgery. But my therapist was incredible. He helped me see my dad's behavior for what it was: a man broken by grief who had cruelly and unfairly made his child bear the weight of it. Slowly, I learned that I wasn't to blame. It wasn't my fault. My dad's anger was his problem, not mine. As I started to heal, something else happened. I got angry. Really angry. It was like all the resentment I had swallowed for 18 years was finally coming to the surface. I was furious at him for what he had stolen from me: a childhood, a sense of security, a father's love. I had spent so many years trying to be the perfect son, all while carrying the guilt he had strapped to my back, and now I saw how deeply unfair it all was. This anger made it almost impossible to have a relationship with him during college. I rarely called, and when he called me, our conversations were short and sharp. I'd snap at him, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. I had zero patience for his attempts to criticize or control me from a distance. One time, it all just boiled over. I hadn't planned it, but in a moment of sheer frustration, I confronted him. I told him everything. About how he had blamed me for Mom's death my entire life, how his words had destroyed my mental health, and how I was done. I told him, "I'm not your scapegoat anymore. You will treat me with respect, or you will not have me in your life at all." For the first time ever, he was silent. He didn't apologize. I knew he wouldn't, but he didn't deny it either. After that call, something shifted. He started to tread more carefully around me. He was gentler on the phone, less harsh. It was a tiny change, but it was there. He was trying, in his own clumsy, inadequate way. But the damage was done. Years of pain couldn't be erased by a slightly better tone of voice. Our relationship remained strained, a fragile thing held together by the thinnest of threads. Over the years, the burning anger has cooled into a sort of resigned sadness. I've come to terms with the fact that I can't change the past, but I can't control how it affects my future. Sheila's unwavering support has been my anchor through it all. She helped me see that I am worthy of love and happiness, a truth I'm still learning to fully believe. A few months ago, my dad got married to his longtime girlfriend, Day. It was a small, quiet wedding. Despite everything, Sheila and I decided to go. We wanted to show our support, to wish them well. A part of me hoped that maybe this new chapter, this new happiness for him, would change him for the better. That hope lasted for exactly 1 month. He called me one evening, his voice tight with a desperation I hadn't heard in years. He confessed that he'd made some terrible financial decisions and was in deep trouble. He hadn't paid the rent on his apartment in 6 months, and an eviction notice was on the door. He'd hidden it all from Day, terrified of the fight it would cause. His first ask was blunt. "Can you cover my back rent?" I said no immediately. The word came out before I even had time to think. Even though I was doing well financially, I had worked my tail off to build a stable life, and I refused to become his emergency safety net. Our history was too complicated for that. But after I hung up, Sheila and I talked it over. Guilt, that old familiar friend, started to creep in. He was still my dad. Maybe I was being too harsh. So, I called him back with a compromise. "I won't pay your rent," I told him, "but you and Day can stay with me for a while. I have a spare room. You can live here, rent-free, until you save up enough money to get back on your feet." It was a difficult offer to make, a huge risk given our past, but it felt like the right thing to do. I made it crystal clear. This is temporary. I expect you to be actively working to fix your situation. He took a day to think it over, but he eventually agreed. Within 2 weeks, he and Day had moved into my guest room. The first month was an awkward adjustment period. It had been years since we'd lived under the same roof, and we were two very different people. I was no longer a timid teenager who would silently absorb his criticism. I was an adult in my own house with my own life. It didn't take long for the old dynamic to resurface. He started making little comments about my lifestyle, my habits, the way I kept my house. It was like no time had passed at all, but this time I wasn't having it. Whenever he'd started on me, I would stand my ground. "Dad, stop. You don't get to comment on my choices, especially not while you're living in my house." I wasn't aggressive, just firm. I was done letting him dictate my life. This, of course, did not sit well with Day. A couple of times, she made comments about how I needed to be more respectful. "He's your father," she'd say. "He sacrificed so much for you." I would just shake my head. She had no idea. She didn't know the half of it, and it wasn't my place to tear down the image he had so carefully constructed for her. So I kept my mouth shut, not wanting to start an argument. I hoped that, with time, we could find a way to coexist. That hope shattered one evening. I came home from a long day at work to find the house a complete mess. Dishes were piled high in the sink, and my dad and Day were sitting on my couch, watching my TV. I had repeatedly told them that they needed to contribute to the household chores, and it was his day to clean. I walked into the living room and asked him why he hadn't cleaned up. He looked at me with that old, familiar dismissiveness that always set my teeth on edge. "You're a grown man," he started, his voice dripping with condescension. "A man I raised single-handedly after your mother passed away. You should be ashamed to even ask me to do more work for you at my age. You can wash the dishes yourself." Something inside me snapped. All the years of suppressed anger came rushing out. "You know what's really embarrassing, Dad?" I shot back, my voice shaking with rage. "The fact that you're sitting on my sofa in my house, watching my TV, eating my food, and ordering me around. You begged me to let you move in here for free. You and your wife have done nothing to help out this entire time. So you know what? If you don't feel like doing the dishes, you can pack your bags and leave. Anytime." The room went dead silent. My dad just stared at me, his mouth slightly open, completely taken aback. For a second, I thought he might actually call my bluff and storm out, but I knew he had nowhere else to go. Without another word, I turned, walked into the kitchen, and slammed the door behind me, my heart pounding in my chest. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Day alone in the kitchen. My dad must have left for work early to avoid me. She asked if we could talk. I braced myself for another lecture on respecting my father, but what she said completely blindsided me. She sat me down and, with a serious expression, told me how hurt my dad was by our fight. She said I had no right to treat him that way, especially considering how much money he had spent to help me buy my house. I just stared at her. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked. My dad hadn't given me a single penny since the day I left for college. I bought this house with my own money, saved over years of hard work. Day explained that my dad had told her he'd used a chunk of his savings to help me with the down payment. It was so absurd, so perfectly in character for him, that I almost laughed. Before I could even process the lie, she continued. She said that given his current financial struggles, it was only fair that I start repaying him. She proposed that I start paying them monthly rent. After all, she finished, this is basically his house too. That's when I lost it. I couldn't help it. I started laughing. A full, deep, incredulous laugh. The sheer audacity of it all was just too much. I looked at her stunned face, wiped a tear from my eye, and said, "Day, I am the sole owner of this house. My dad did not pay for a single dime of it. He doesn't even have enough money to pay his own rent. How could he possibly afford to help me buy a house?" The look on her face was a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning horror. It was clear she had been completely played. Is that really true?" she stammered. I laid it all out for her. After our talk, she didn't argue. She just sat there, looking pale. Not long after that, she quietly went upstairs, packed her bags, and left. I didn't try to stop her. When my dad came home that evening and saw her things were gone, he went ballistic. He called her, found out I had told her the truth, and then he turned on me. He started blaming me for everything, accusing me of sabotaging their relationship, of making his wife uncomfortable. "You should have just kept your mouth shut," he yelled. "You should have just let her believe the lie. You always have to make me feel small." It was unbelievable. Here I was, the one who had offered them a lifeline, and I was being blamed for the consequences of his own deception. It was my entire childhood all over again, him making me the scapegoat for his own failures. He insisted that I call Day, apologize, and lie to her, tell her that he really had helped me buy the house. I had reached my limit. "No," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I'm not going to lie for you. Not anymore." I told him I couldn't have him in my house any longer, that the constant fighting and manipulation were destroying my mental health. I told him to pack his things and be out by the next morning. He pleaded, argued that he had nowhere to go, but I was done. For the first time in my life, I didn't care about his excuses. I stuck to my decision. The next morning, he was gone. Ever since then, he's been bombarding me with texts and voicemails, complaining about how I've ruined his life and his marriage, as Day still refuses to talk to him. He keeps saying that a good son would never have kicked his own father out. A lot of people online, after I share my story, told me I should contact Day and tell her everything, the whole story of my childhood. I had wanted to stay out of it, but they were right. She deserved to know who she was married to. So I reached out to her. We met for coffee a week later. I told her everything about the constant blame for my mother's death, the emotional abuse, the years of feeling worthless. She was shocked. She admitted my dad had painted himself as a struggling single father who had sacrificed everything for his ungrateful son. I just shook my head at the web of lies. Then, she dropped a bombshell of her own. The reason my dad was broke? He had a severe gambling problem. He'd lost all their money, and she hadn't told me because he was too ashamed. She then confessed that she had never wanted to move in with me in the first place. She was uncomfortable with the idea, which is why my dad had invented the lie about co-owning the house, to make her feel less guilty about accepting my offer. When she found out from me that it was all just another manipulation, she was devastated and deeply embarrassed about having asked me for rent. I reassured her that it wasn't her fault. The blame lay squarely with him. As we were leaving, Day told me she was going to take some serious time away from my dad to reevaluate their entire relationship. It's been 3 months since then. I have completely and totally cut my dad out of my life. The last time we spoke, he tried to start the blame game again. I didn't even engage. I just blocked his number. And since then, a profound sense of peace has settled over my life. The constant stress, the waiting for the next manipulation, it's all gone. It feels like I've reclaimed my own mind. Sheila has been my rock through all of this. Her support has been the foundation I've rebuilt my life on. With my dad finally out of the picture and Sheila by my side, I'm finding a new sense of stability and happiness. I'm focusing on my future, on our future, and for the first time, it feels like it's truly mine.